minutes of our last meeting.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we may proceed with the chair's report.
Good morning. Great to see everyone. We're gonna jump right in. Apologies for the late start. It's been a very busy time in general here at the Housing Authority. Last week we marked the second anniversary of the release of NYCHA. And as folks have heard me say, I think it's really important to pause and acknowledge the work of the many people, including our staff, but the partners, the both external and internal, to help us that have helped us achieve some of the accomplishments that we have done over the course of the last 2 years. It's also a moment to reflect and talk about what's, as we know, there's still so much more to be done, but we spent a lot of time last week doing that, so we want to give you a little bit of an update on that. Also provide some updates on the movement and progress in our NYCHA Neighborhoods development program. The news that clearly has dominated our attention for the last several weeks was also reinforced with the release of the Trump administration's release of its federal budget yesterday. So we'll talk a bit about that and the impacts on the New York City Housing Authority. So, important to note, 2 years. We've done a lot of work together. Many folks in this room have been responsible for that. We were all over the city at developments with residents, with staff, highlighting some of the important investments in moving the agency to the 21st century around our digital transformation, whether that's the tools to our staff, whether it's the kiosks that now are in all of our management offices that allow residents to file their online recertifications, search for social services and other types of resources in their community, et cetera, et cetera. We also were with members of the NYCHA Resident Training Academy, which, as you know, is funded by the Robin Hood Foundation. That has been a real source of new employees and hires for the authority. And so we went and sort of talked to some of the new members of that academy, launched a new safety initiative with our colleagues at Local 237, which we're very excited about. One of the things that I hear often in visiting developments is, our staff are now faced with everything from how to manage mentally challenged individuals who found their way onto our developments, dogs, all of the things that perhaps may not have been something that caretakers and staff may have not, sort of encountered. Local 237 has identified a consultant that they are working with to train our staff. We kicked this off at Ravenswood last week, which is also a FlexOps site. So we have staff there beginning at 6 a.m. And it's been really welcomed both by staff and the leadership as another tool to support our staff to do their jobs better. We also, with our partners at the Department of Sanitation, bless you, have and will continue to highlight our commitment to sustainability, whether that be on the recycling effort, on the significant lighting installation and retrofit program as part of the mayor's MAP program, and also and supported by other resources. So just a lot of activity around the city to highlight some of the investments that have taken time to actually materialize. As you've heard me and others talk about, the Sandy program or recovery program is a significant part of the work that's on the street. Last week we announced another start of permanent construction at, I believe this is at the Coney Island houses. Is that right? which is one of the things we said is that by the end of 2017, we will be in permanent construction at all of the Sandy impacted developments. So again, just another march towards meeting that goal. Since we last met, one important addition and another investment from the city has been the mayor has invested an additional $335 million to support facade improvement, largely around sort of local law 11 work. So this is both, a huge investment into the authority, also a challenge for our residents. We know because more scaffolding is going up, but unlike the days of the past, there is actually now money to support the work where that scaffolding is going up. So another significant investment by the administration into preserving our buildings. We also last week started the resident engagement at LaGuardia Houses, which is now the third site in our Next Gen Neighborhoods development program. Again, you'll recall this is what we call our 50-50 program, where we intend to support the development of 50% affordable housing, 50% market housing, any and all revenue that's generated from this activity. Half of that revenue goes back to the development where the construction is happening, and half back to the rest of the portfolio needs. We began with sort of the first public engagement meeting with residents of the LaGuardia Houses. LaGuardia has a $70 million unmet capital need. It is a large development on the Lower East Side. Someone said it was the best public meeting they'd ever been to, which says a lot given how many meetings we have. So I'd like to think that's a reflection of the pre-work that staff did. Tons of door knocking, lobby meetings, mailers under the door, robocalls to let residents know that we were beginning this discussion. We partnered with several community-based organizations, including Reverend Mark, or Pastor Mark, as people know him, but he's the head of the Primavera Church on the Lower East Side. Many of his parishioners are also residents of LaGuardia Houses, to be sort of another source where people can get information. So a lot of pre-work went into the beginning of what will be approximately a 3-month engagement process here at LaGuardia, and continuing as we work to deliver new resources to that community. We also announced the developer selection at the Holmes Towers, which is also part of our Next Gen Neighborhoods program, a site on the Upper East Side, where we intend to build 50% market, 50% affordable housing. The developer team proposes a really, what we thought, a compelling vision that truly connects the community, both in its sort of architectural design, but also in the significant community facilities and programming that they will partner for folks who know. Asphalt Green is several blocks away, which is a major sort of sports and athletic facility, where a number of NYCHA residents, through partnerships, do utilize their services. They intend to be a tenant in this new facility, an 18,000 square foot new sports facility, of which NYCHA residents will receive, I want to say half off of the admissions rates, including the residents of the affordable housing portion of the building will also receive those discounts. Half of the permanent jobs that will be generated through this effort will go to NYCHA residents, and perhaps for us, another very important factor is we expect to receive approximately $25 million in new revenue, half of which will go to the capital needs of homes. I will say that The developer proposal also intends to really remake the public space and realm of homes. So everything from repaving and landscaping and lighting. So this is not just a new building, it's truly sort of integrating itself into the existing Homes Isaacs campus. So big news on this side. The resident engagement, I think, here has been complex and interesting, and I think what will be telling is the continued engagement of residents in the redesign of the playground, by which we'll have some of our youngest residents help to do, and this will be an ongoing process over the next several months. We also closed or broke ground on a project that had been in, I think, at least 11 years in the making. In the Chelsea neighborhood, 160 units of affordable housing, 100% affordable housing. And for those of you who know Chelsea, this is quite a feat. I think it sort of speaks to the administration's commitment and NYCHA's to continue to lead throughout our city affordable housing for folks who are earning minimum of or maximum of $33,000. This is, I believe, 1 block away from the High Line. So again, a really interesting partnership, new parks and recreational facilities for the Fulton houses where this will be constructed. And again, I think another example of an interesting public-private partnership. Okay. We should have like a transition slide to kind of the doom that is the news out of Washington. And in all seriousness, we got an early indication of what the administration's plans were for the federal budget. That was once again highlighted, underscored, emphasized in the release of the president's fiscal year 18 budget. So what does it mean? Kind of held steady to the proposal to cut HUD programming by $6.2 billion. That translates into, on the public housing side, about almost a 2/3 or 68% cut on the capital program, which for NYCHA is about $200 million less. That means in terms of our annual, as you know, our annual capital budget is about $300 million. And as our EVP for capital reminded me yesterday, 60 million of that 300 million goes to our bond B debt service. So we're at 300 million, that gets cut by 200 million, 60 million goes to the bond service, you have $40 million left. So very significant cut on the capital side. On the operating side, about an 11% cut nationally, which represents about an and this is still sort of in flux, between an $80 to $130 million cut. It's important to note that this is on top of the 2% reduction that we just received in the, what some have called continuing resolution or HUD bill, that gets us from now until September, I believe. So again, sort of compounding the significant operating impacts. On the Section 8 side, further reductions on the Section 8 HAP program, the actual voucher program, that will result in about a 13,000 voucher loss for us. In addition, the significant cuts to CDBG, which we don't necessarily receive directly, but this is obviously a huge funding program for HPD, but for cities across the country who use it for all sorts of projects. Many other cuts to other important HUD programs, and so this is what we know. As we know, just in terms of the legislative process, this is a budget. Congress will begin its sort of negotiation and appropriations process, I believe, within the next 2 weeks. Then there will be the process over the summer. there are also, just to note, some regulatory changes that will have significant impacts for us. Actual proposal to amend or essentially raise residence rents. Currently, by statute, the rents are capped at 30%. There is a proposal to increase that to 35%. Whether or not it's something that happens in fiscal year 18, fiscal year 19, the bill sort of is somewhat unclear. Regardless, that it is an intention for this administration to raise rents on public housing residents. I think in an earlier presentation we talked about the percentage of the average rent of residents already, the average tenure of our residents. For many of our families who saw an increase because of the flat rent regulations, adding to that, when we've estimated is about $100 a month for NYCHA residents. This is going to be a significant financial burden for families who are already below the area median income, if not the poverty line altogether. Sort of a removal of the existing utility reimbursement programs, and they work differently for Section 8 programs, but essentially for our Section 8 residents who now, if they qualify, receive a small reimbursement for utility allowances, we'll see that go away. So in effect, they may see a rental increase because their voucher covers less and less of their rent, and they will potentially see this utility allowance or utility reimbursement wiped out. Okay, so it's awful. It is, I released a statement yesterday echoing what the mayor and others have said. This is an assault on poor people, but certainly on public housing. And, we will continue to fight these cuts at every step of the way. I think it's important to note that when you have a budget that is as extreme as this, it really just shifts the entire discussion to the right, so that you're fighting for less horrible cuts. So it really changes the dynamic of the discussion. We, recognize we cannot do this alone. We will continue to be partnering with, both the usual partners as well as some new voices in national advocacy. This will have a tremendous impact on our 2018 budget planning. And what I said to staff is that it really means that we have to work even smarter with the resources that we have, and to try and hold on to the gains that we've made over the last 2 years. So much more to do, for sure, but it puts into perspective what is important. And there will be hard choices that we will have to make, and we will obviously engage with you on those as we go forward. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm going to share with you operational progress for the month of April 2017, and also to share with you our next pilot phase of flexible operations. We're going to be looking at key performance indicators again for April. I want to note that we are going through extensive business process reviews and reevaluations of all of our operations, including looking at the targets that have been set, some of them long before this administration got here, looking at the realities of those, and really starting to benchmark our performance based on sort of reality. So that's something that we're going to continue to work with the board in establishing those. So for work order overview, at the end of April, there were 145,443 work orders, which were higher than the March 2017 number and for the April 2016. In the past 12 months, just an overview, we created 2.8 million work orders, and that we closed 2.6 million work orders. I want to talk about that a little bit. In April of 2017, 3,142 more work orders were created. So we're creating more work orders in our system. Why we are creating them? We're going through sort of intensive apartment inspections, including our 5 Alive, and really looking at the kinds of things that need to be looked at in our apartment inspections. And we continue to do our pre-FAS inspection work in preparation for our HUD independent review, which looks at creating work orders specifically around grounds. One thing to note, though, in April 2017, 17,102 more work orders were closed than a year ago, April 2016. So we closed 6% more work orders. So the numbers are showing that we are increasing the amount of work orders, but there is a productivity effort going on right now that I'll share with you a little bit more when we talk about the skilled trades.
You just referenced work orders around grounds. You mean NYCHA, the grounds?
Yeah, we
okay.
create a work order for tripping hazards or eroding soil, conditions around playgrounds, etc.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
No, it's just the increase. Are we comparing apples to apples or apples to oranges? The increase seems rather dramatic.
It is apples to apples. It's really just the amount of apples. We are identifying more apples.
Yeah.
This year.
But it is a comparable comparison.
Exactly. Yeah. The same work items are being identified each time. If I can't have to believe it, but just to kind of share with you, in March of 2016, a month before, 255,000 work orders were created, and we closed 2016, we created 255,000 work orders. In March of 17, we created 270,000 work orders. So we created 15,000 work orders in March. And in 2016, we closed 230,000 work orders. And in March 2017, we closed 260,000 work orders. So we are closing more work orders, doing more work, but the numbers show that we have a lot of work to do, obviously. On the emergency work orders, this again, I think is really reference to our successes in our heat and hot water efforts, particularly the summer overhaul that was done by our crews. Most of these work orders, 95% of the work orders during this last period were heat and hot water. Next month, the chair and I will be giving you a more detailed heat season summary of this particular season and preface for next year as well. But it shows sort of these emergency work orders are gas, electric, and elevator, etc. Our average time to resolve is 10.2 hours, and this was lower than the 14.2 hours that were done a year ago. On maintenance work orders, these are our basic simple repairs. In April 2017, the service level was 5.1 days. It showed a decrease from March of 17 and a reduction of 6% from a year ago. One of the things that we're really looking at and paying attention to is those oldest work orders and outlier work orders. And as we do these older ones, we think these numbers will continue to go down. Again, things that we attribute to our successes are the real-time repairs, looking at the use of our handhelds, opening and closing work orders, work through our 505 work for smoke detectors and things like that. And also, I think there's a comfort level with our maintenance workers with the handhelds more than there were, obviously, when we started this program. On the skill trades, challenging. The skill trade service level measures the performance of addressing more complex repairs, such as carpentry, painting, and plastering. The service level in April 2017 was 69.8 days. It was higher than March of 17, which was 64.2 days. Again, as I noted earlier, though, in April 2017, there were more work orders created than in 16. And in April of 17, we closed 17,000 more work orders. That's 8% more work orders were closed than a year ago. One of the things I want to talk a little bit about is the efforts we've done around skill trades. We've now looked at, again, as I noted, looking at our business process reviews to do redesign around that. We're looking at our materials management and our procurement efforts. We've looked at things like having development-based skill trades where we have skilled workers assigned to sites and enhanced scheduling. And I think one of the things most importantly is our attention to performance. One of the tools we have is a daily productivity employee report. So I can tell you right now, based on a report of all of our workers, their badge numbers, their names, their titles, what their work units are, where they're working and their location, their start time, their end time, and most importantly, the wrench time. besides the time they're getting around and getting stuff, how much time they're actually attributing to getting work done. This wrench time is now proving that we're closing more work orders per day than we were in the past. I think Bob Ronald likes to talk about it in terms of the Hawthorne effect, of which when you put light on something, the productivity will increase. So now we actually have a way of, on a daily basis, tracking all of our staff's measures. More specifically, though, I do want to talk across the board, our productivity is going up. But in terms of exterminators, the extermination system, we went through a business process review at the end of last year. Looked at approaching it in a way in which we are being more proactive, creating more preventive maintenance work rather than reactive work. And in February of 2017, we had 3,272 open work orders for extermination. At the end of April, we had 1,735 open work orders. Also, in the beginning of February, it was about 10 days to respond to an extermination work order. By the end of April, it was 5 days to respond. And one of the things, real key contributors to that is that we went from 6.35 work orders closed per day to over 11 work orders done per day. So we're actually, again, we're increasing the amount of work and starting to pay some dividends. We're going to continue this kind of deeper dive with plumbing and the other trades as well. It's a great challenge for us, but it's also when I talked about the idea of resetting our targets and our expectations based on work rules or just the realities of things. These are the types of things we're going to continue to do work with the board. On the apartment turnaround time, this measures the average day reoccupied. The year-to-date turnaround for 2017 was 61.4 days. It was higher than 54.8 days in April of 2016. Tackling the longer units. For the year-to-date turnaround of April 2016, there were that were reoccupied. Of that 2,500 units, 302 of those units, about 12% of those were over 100 days. This year, in April, there were again about 2,000 units that were reoccupied, but 17% of those 356 units took over 17 days. So so we're actually looking at tackling units that have been off the rent rolls longer this year than we did last year. More specifically, the 2,051 units that have been repaired since the beginning of this year, there's an average again of about 61 days. Of that 2,051 units, 1,687 of those units had a turnaround time of less than 100 days. Actually, it was a 41-day average. The difference, the 364 units had an average of 155 days. So when you look at the averaging 155 with the 41, you look at that 61. Again, for the month of April, of the 458 units that we completed with an average of 55 days, about 400 of those were done in 39 days, and 63 were done in an average of 153 days. One of the questions becoming, again, what becomes the target measure for us to look at? It's now, again, I'm just a prejudge thing, but basically we're talking about resetting our targets. About 40 days right now represents a target of the when you take the outliers out of what our actual average performance would be. On the customer satisfaction, in April, we made 3,447 calls, 3,161 responded, and of that, 2,525 went under the heading of "Would you rate your level of satisfaction provided by NYCHA employee as good to excellent?" Almost 80%, 79.9% felt that we did it. Again, this number hasn't changed. Again, I think it talks about, as I said before, when a resident gets called and asked, "How was your service?" When the complete job was not done, there's a tendency for that resident to say, "Hey, I don't like this. I don't care how well this person did fix my leak. I still have a hole in my bathroom." So I think that's, again, when we look at the customer satisfaction, it talks about individual work. And this gets backed up with our QA numbers too. We're tracking about 96% of the work that we go back into to look at an apartment to see if the work was done correctly. Most of the great percentage of work is being done correctly, but for the tenant's perspective or tenant's appreciation, that particular job doesn't represent the complete job. For flexible operations, is an initiative.
Can I ask a question about that? Does it make sense then to try and maybe ask the question after the complete job, or is that?
I think that may be the kind, we talked about that before. There may be a way that we can actually look at revising this.
Mhm.
And also, right now, these are robocall things, and we really don't have the staffing right now to go into deeper dive, but that's a great recommendation, to look at trying to figure out whenever the job was done completely.
Right.
Although my guess is someone's going to say it took an awful long time to get this job done, so we could very well be in the same situation.
One question I'd like, or a suggestion. I think that the way that we address these repairs should be uniformed around the entire authority, not having separate ways of doing the same job.
Mhm.
And this way, the resident doesn't get confused as to, well, wait a minute, do I have to call? Are they gonna do a child ticket? What the actual process, I feel that it should be unified around the entire authority when it comes to these type of repairs.
I totally agree with you. It does bring up another point, though, that I talked about the business plan review. So much of the work we do is misdiagnosed to begin with. So consequently, we're also giving mixed messages to the resident. If there's something that if we have the experts saying this is indeed, a P-trap that needs to be repaired, as opposed to, generically fix the sink, we now have a better ability to get the material that's needed and a better ability to tell the resident, hey, we can actually get this done within this particular time period. So those are the kinds of things we're also looking at.
Okay.
Flexible operations is an initiative that creates flexible staggered shifts for property management staff to provide better customer service. In July of 2016, we launched our first pilot at 12 sites. The goals were to improve the appearance and condition of the public spaces, to extend the hours of repair and maintenance work orders, and to expand the property management office. Announcing today with the board that we will be going live with the second phase. And again, this is in partnership with Local 237 and Local 37. So this is a union labor management partnership to provide additional services to the residents. Next Tuesday, next May 30th, we will be looking at launching the next phase. This next phase will again have an earlier shift, the 6 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. shift for caretakers. At one site, we'll be looking at an evening shift at Grant, and at one site, we'll be looking at a maintenance worker shift at Beach 41. We'll be looking at a 11:30 to 8 p.m. shift. And in all the sites, we're looking at extending our management offices, keeping them open until 7 o'clock.
1 day a week.
Yes. And that we will, as we've done in the past, we'll be looking at doing resident outreach to make sure to see how the residents feel about this on the, from the beginning of the pilot through the middle of it, and having evaluations at the end to develop some success measures. And the goal really is to provide higher level of NYCHA responsibility to the sites earlier in the days, especially when folks are going to work early. They have a chance to come in and see that the lobby or the elevator has been cleaned, rather than leaving when it's dirty and coming home when it's dirty. This really is a chance, I think, to develop with really just a change in shifts, a way of providing the perception as well as the reality of increased customer service.
How did it come to, so I noticed that only one site has the later shift for both caretakers and maintenance workers. How did you come to that?
Very much a part of this is a voluntary program. And so we did outreach, and based on the responses to what our staff desired, was how we based our staffing to this. So it's really
So there still could be a disconnect between what's optimal and what staff is willing to do.
At this exactly. At this point, we really are again we're evaluating it all, but ideally they'd all have the measured increased shifts. But right now, it is a totally voluntary program, so we responded to it that way. All right. Well, any questions? That concludes the report of Germany.
Chair, may I proceed with item number 1 for this calendar?
Good morning.
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 Nicole Ferrer, EVP Real Estate, presenting item number 1. So as authorized by the July 2016 Board Resolution 16-7/27-7, Section 18 applications have been submitted to HUD for the long-term lease of the 3 next-generation NYCHA sites at Ingersoll, Millbrook, and Van Dyke houses. The Section 18 applications were submitted with required information, including resident consultation meeting notes and a letter of support from the mayor's office. Additionally, the HUD New York office sign-off of the environmental assessment as certified by New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development, otherwise known as HPD. This resolution is presented to the board to request authorization to ground lease the project sites and grant any necessary easements to the selected developers or their affiliate entities to develop affordable low-income housing upon receipt of HUD approval of the Section 18 applications and financing commitments. For the Ingersoll project, authorization is also requested to form corporate affiliates of the authority, which will be used in the organizational structure of the transaction. Financing sources for the projects include tax-exempt bond financing with low-income housing tax credits issued by the New York City Housing Development Corp. And capital subsidies from HPD and HDC. As a condition for receiving city financing and subsidy, and as specified in the RFP, the authority will ground lease each of the project sites for a term of 99 years at a nominal rent of $1 per annum. The authority will also receive a portion of the developer fee on each project as allowed by HPD and HDC programs. Additionally, the Ingersoll project will generate development rights through the HPD Inclusionary Housing Program, a portion of which will be retained by the authority. The authority will receive less than fair market value for the ground lease of the project sites. However, the proposed projects will provide commensurate public benefit of additional low-income housing and needed community facilities and services. The proposed ground leasing of the project sites, as documented in the 2016 PHA plan, was vetted by the Resident Advisory Board. Pursuant to HUD's regulations governing disposition of property, the authority presented the development proposals to the respective resident associations and to the authority's citywide council of presidents and obtained a letter of support from the deputy mayor. Just as an update, the projected closing dates for Millbrook and Ingersoll will be June of this year, so next month, and the Van Dyke project is projected to close in December of this year. Therefore, it is recommended that the members authorize the chair, the general manager, or their respective designees to execute any and all documents deemed necessary to effectuate the projects upon Section 18 application approval from HUD and financing commitment for the purposes and on the terms described herein, and upon such additional terms and conditions as the general counsel or general counsel's designee deems appropriate. Thank you. Any questions on the projects? Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
I defer to the lady first.
Nicole, could you elaborate on, you said a portion of the air rights will be retained by the authority. Can you
Correct.
elaborate on
What that means?
what that means? Thanks.
Sure. So the inclusionary program, essentially, the affordable housing that's going to be built at Ingersoll will, we will retain a certificate that we can sell to a developer in the district where NYCHA can make a return off of that certificate. So essentially, a market rate developer can come to NYCHA and say, okay, since this 160 some odd units were built here, we would like to purchase those rights from you. And so NYCHA has retained the majority of those rights so that we get the financial benefit as opposed to the developer getting that benefit.
So it's not, so if I understand you correctly, it's not intended for a future development at that site, but just to be sold as just a way of bringing
Correct.
cash in.
Yeah,
you're able to do that within a certain district?
yes. So the inclusionary housing program, we have to apply to HPD to say we are the generating site. That Ingersoll project is the generating site. And then within 2 years, we have to find a developer within that district to sell our rights to. And NYCHA will make more financial return on this project.
Is there a deal in the works that?
We are currently talking to a few developers
Yeah.
in downtown Brooklyn. Yeah.
Thanks.
This is just curious
Sure.
from my old community board days. I see that the zoning floor area,
Mhm.
normally it would have a designation, like a letter and a number or something. Does that apply in this particular zoning?
Like an R7A or
Right.
so for Ingersoll or just in general? The
Well,
question.
give me both.
Okay. So I don't have the exact zoning designations, but just each of these projects falls within the proper zoning. So for residential zoning, as of right, we can build on NYCHA land without any changes to the zoning code.
But if I think I understand can we build commercial?
Right.
Right.
That's what you're-
Okay. So on these 3 projects, we are not zoned for commercial. That's why you see community facility uses in these projects. We work with city planning to change that zoning when we have the opportunity, when they're doing rezoning in certain neighborhoods, so that we can bring more commercial opportunity to NYCHA residents.
One follow-up question
Sure.
to our previous discussion. So if a transaction's not closed within 2 years for the sale of air rights, do we lose the ability to,
We don't have to close, but we have to target, and so we can work with HPD to extend
Okay.
that. Yeah,
You have to have a
receiving site. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
congratulations, by the way.
Hi, good morning. I'm Karen Caldwell, EVP Finance for NYCHA. I am presenting board item number 2. Authorization is requested to enter into an agreement with Towers Watson Delaware, Inc. to provide actuarial services commencing on June 1, 2017 and continuing through May 31, 2022, or commencing on such other date as may be determined by the general manager or his designee, and continuing for 5 years thereafter. The request for proposal for actuarial services was released on October 4th, 2016. The objective of the RFP was to select a qualified actuarial firm to assess casualty and workers' compensation claim liabilities and provide on-demand services in support of the authority's insurance procurements. Under 24 CFR Title IX of the authority is required to have, in addition to the auditing component, a full actuarial review conducted by an independent property casualty actuary who is an associate or fellow of a recognized actuarial organization. Under this agreement, Towers Watson will provide an estimate of NYCHA's ultimate liability loss and loss adjustment expense reserves for the applicable NYCHA fiscal year, including an estimate of the incurred but not reported reserves for general and auto liability coverage. A forward-looking estimate of ultimate liability losses for each year, NYCHA fiscal year following the NYCHA fiscal year that was estimated above. An estimate of NYCHA's ultimate workman's compensation loss and loss adjustment expense reserves for the applicable fiscal year, including an estimate of incurred but not reported reserves. A forward-looking estimate of that ultimate workman compensation loss for each NYCHA fiscal year following that fiscal year. An estimate of NYCHA's total ultimate workers' compensation loss and an estimate of that portion of the estimated total ultimate loss for all claims that exceed our self-insurance reserve. And lastly, to provide on-demand consulting services, data support, and analysis for existing insurance renewals, possible insurance procurements, and alternative risk transfer options. Are there any questions?
I have a couple. So I seem to recall something similar in the last few months. I may be misremembering, that's entirely possible, but is this entirely different, or do you seem to recall as a similar
This is
service that we contracted?
not for actuarial services. No, this was not what we came for. But we have several insurance procurements that we do throughout the year for our different providers that are in excess of our self-insurance reserves for our general liability, workman's compensation. So we haven't been before the board over the last few months on this.
And then just taking a step back, can you just comment on the value of this type of service? Is it really to help with budget projections, or is there some other value to you and your team that you get from this service?
When you have a self-insurance reserve, HUD requires you
I see.
to have this service provided by this external
Got it.
vendor. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
My name is Brian Clark. I'm the Senior Vice President of Operations for Property Management. I'll be presenting items 3, 4, and 5 this morning. Item 3 is a requirement contract with Granger to provide us with garbage bags. These are your standard trash bags that we use to line our garbage cans and used in our janitorial operations. We are using an existing agreement with DCAS to structure this contract. It is a 3-year contract starting in next November. It's time to expire when our current contract expires, so we'll have it in place. And we use this as needed, and the bags are drop shipped to the development, or we can have them delivered to our warehouse. Authorization is requested to enter into this agreement with WW Granger Incorporated for the purchases of plastic garbage bags commencing on November 25th, 2017, and continuing through November 24th, 2020, or commencing on such other date as may be determined by the general manager or the senior vice president for operations, and continuing for 3 years thereafter, pursuant to the terms and conditions of the New York City Department of City-wide Administrative Services, contract PC 62993. Any questions?
So, yeah, I noticed that there were no bids, so this did not go out to bid?
No, it did not. So there was an existing contract over in DCAS that provided these services. So provided that these, that we can use that to structure our procurement instead of going out to go out to bid. There was a cost analysis done to see if we felt that the pricing was competitive, and we felt that the pricing was in our favor, and moved forward with this agreement.
Even though it was over budget.
So the estimate, yeah. So
Yeah.
the estimate was, based. Frankly, the estimate was a bit stale. It was based on older pricing.
Mhm.
Okay.
So a slightly different question. How do we size the need for our garbage bags?
So I mean, typically it's historical usage.
Historical
Yeah,
usage.
yeah.
And are we seeing an increase, decrease, sort of flat? You know where I'm going with it.
Yes. One would hope that we would see a decrease in these bags as we increase recycling.
Very good. But just because we just started this.
But that is another data point that we can take a look at. Yeah,
Because you use a different type of bag for recycling, or you
Yeah.
use no bag at all?
yeah, no, there's clear bags.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay, good questions. Thank you, board. Okay, item 4, we're requesting to reject this sole bid, and it's in the best interest of the Housing Authority. This contract is for carts that our painters and plasterers use to transport materials, to and from the job site. We are currently reviewing the different types of carts that we use. We may or may not be bringing this back to the board for rebid, or could be brought back in a different form with a different specification. Okay. And we have the ability to purchase carts as needed without this contract. Any questions?
I just have one. Are we still separating the painting jobs within the developments? For example, if it's one room, we can do it, and if it's the whole apartment, is it a contractor? How is that?
So one of the things that we've changed, we feel it's a significant improvement, is for resident-driven requests for painting and plastering. In the past, we had maintenance workers who would go to the job to assess and determine what would be the next course of action. Maintenance workers are labor. They actually, make repairs, and they don't have the ability to do plastering or painting based on existing, job descriptions and union rules. So what we did is we've made a decision to use paint supervisors to go to these types of appointments. And because we feel that they have the proper background to really determine whether this can go to a painter, whether it can go to a plasterer, or whether it should go directly to a vendor. What we've seen already is we've seen a decrease in the number of plastering work orders. And what I mean by a decrease is it started off as a plastering work order, and when it went out, when the paint supervisor went out, they determined it was actually could be done by a painter. Certain amount of painting is surface prep, right? So, plastering is really when you get down to putting up lath and doing, 2 to 3 coats of plaster. But surface imperfection can be taken by painters. Plastering is one of our, painting and plastering is 2 of our largest backlogs in work orders. But we have more resources available to do painting than plastering, and typically plastering takes longer to do than painting. So we've seen an improvement, in that area in determining it. Typically, the way it'll work is if we feel that a job is more than a day, we will send it to a vendor because it's more cost effective to do that. That's for painting.
And so a painter, if I heard you correctly, can also do, type of plaster work that we would need an actual
they can do the surface, what we typically think of as spackling. They can also do a certain amount of plastering up to, I believe it's between 1 and 2 square feet of plastering.
But they want to tack something where it has to do with.
Yeah, I mean, when we have to take down, the serious plastering jobs, and you have to take down walls and things, you really need a plaster. Okay.
So follow-up question. So if we're outsourcing paint for the most part, do we need to own carts at sites?
Yes, I mean, we do an awful lot of painting with in-house staff.
Right, and these are specialized carts that for painting, I'm just curious about the need for specialized carts for painting versus.
So ideally, what we want the cart to fit is 5-gallon pails, typically 4, 1 for compound, 1 for primer, and 2 for finish coat. So this is to move the material to and from. They are kind of customized a bit for for painting and plastering, for those types of materials.
Yeah.
I hope I answered your question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Rejection of this sole bid is recommended in the best interest of the authority. Okay. Item 5. Item 5, we would like to lay over until the June calendar. The chair asked for additional analysis that we plan to complete by that time and provide to the board for review prior to moving forward with the site.
Good morning. Louis Ponce, Senior Vice President of Operations for Support Services. I'll be presenting items 6 through 13. Item number 6 is a supply-only parts contract authorization. We seek authorization to go into a 3-year contract with GS Dunham LLC to supply us with MEPCO heating supplies. They will deliver these supplies to any of our developments and also to the LIC warehouse. These supplies are related to heat distribution. They're all for basements or apartments, for radiator work, or for the zone valves that allows steam into the buildings, or the vacuum tanks that bring the condensate back and create a vacuum in our system. That's it. Any questions on it?
Just one. Why MEPCO only? What's the significance of MEPCO?
These are for parts. Sometimes it's not the entire apparatus. So it might be a pump that goes onto a MEPCO vacuum tank, or it might be the motor that goes onto a MEPCO zone valve. So although the title of the request is MEPCO parts, the vendors are allowed to give alternatives. They're allowed to give equals. In this one, there was only one bidder, and the bidder, GS Dunham, owns MEPCO. So they were able to provide more competitive pricing. So we contacted the other vendors why they didn't bid, and they told us that's why, because the manufacturer was going to bid on it and they didn't think they could provide competitive pricing.
But does MEVCO represent a quality standard that is important, or does it conform with existing machinery? I'm just curious, like, what the significance of MEVCO?
Conformity testing. MEPCO is actually the name of a company.
Yeah.
It's on the thing. Yeah, so that's typically what we have already installed in our locations. The majority of our heating distribution parts are MEPCO. So we try to, it's also a parts to save the parts. So if we look for MEPCO, because we know that it'll be the same manufacturer. If we use other manufacturers' parts, which HUD allows them to if they give us an equal, it will be difficult to stock parts because some parts are going to be national, some parts are MEPCO, some parts are going to be other stuff.
Okay.
So we encourage to use MEPCO, but again, they are allowed to use other ones, but in this case they did. Okay. Items 7 through 13 are very similar, so I'll present them all at once. This is a service and parts contract. We seek to award 7 requirement contracts to Samaru Services Incorporated for inspection, testing, repair, alteration, and installation of range hood suppression system and various citywide developments. These are 2-year contracts with a 1-year extension at the authority's discretion. Right now, we have 227 of these range hood suppression systems. These are located above in our centers where they prepare food. So they have to have a suppression in case there's a fire that breaks out. So we have to, according to the rules of the city, we have to do every 6 months, there has to be an inspection on the fire suppression system to make sure that it's charged and make sure that if there is a fire, that it will activate. Samaru has done a little over $500,000 for us in the last 5 years. They currently have 4 of our contracts. 7 contracts comprise the entire city. We've broken it up into 7 districts. So Samaru has been the low and actually the only bidder on these 7 contracts. We did, procurement did reach out to other vendors. The other vendors said that their business is mostly inspections. They don't do repairs. So part of this contract, if during the inspection they find something wrong, the vendor will also make the repair. They will hire 1 Section 3 hire on each of these contracts. So there'll be 7 Section 3 hires on all of these contracts for all of them together, rather.
So my question here is while the individual contracts are somewhat, sort of small, they represent a bigger capital need or investment. Is that correct? I mean,
it's really just to us to conform with the regulation that the fire department sets out.
Right.
So if we find issues with the inspection, they'll do the repair. Sometimes there might be a whole capital upgrade that's needed where you have to replace the entire hood system. On those cases, mostly we're going to the sponsor to do those, but we do have the ability to do it here.
They have no money, but so with this investment, we will be at code. This isn't just obviate the need for the long-term investment or the capital need, I guess, or is this just a short-term fix? Is this like we're actually getting out of this business?
This is not to get out of the business. This is just to remain in compliance. But there are occasions, there are occasions when we find some that it doesn't pass inspection.
Right.
And the only way it can pass is if it's upgraded.
Right.
And most of those times now we're actually shutting it down.
So these 7 are not. These are like these need repair in order to be in compliance today.
To make sure that in case there is a fire.
And are they in sponsored centers or are these in our building? Our residential buildings?
The majority are in centers.
They're in centers. So we are paying, the authority is paying for these investments in places that are tenanted by other organizations.
And as we're in talks with Kenya to come out of these responsibilities.
But the authority is paying for what would probably be a tenant responsibility in any other.
Absolutely. It's solely used by the sponsors. It's not used by the authority.
And is this a new requirement? This is just.
No, this has been for years. So they require us to inspect twice a year. They also require us to clean 4 times a year, every quarter. So there is a separate contractor that does cleaning. So there is additional cost just to remain in compliance with these locations.
And are there any centers in if you know, that currently take care of this as part of their leasehold, or is this? You see where I'm going?
My recollection is there is a handful. The larger ones, there is a handful.
The larger centers are able to pay for this, and it's the smaller providers that don't.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you for your time.
Good morning, Deborah Goddard, EVP for Capital Projects. Several votes for you this morning. The first two items, 14 and 15, relate to Sandy restoration work. A recommendation for award in each case to technical construction services. The first one relates to Campos Plaza 2, Sandy recovery work, including gas generators, reinforcement of building perimeter walls, and replacement of mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, some resiliency work. You will note both in this case and in the next vote that our bids came in significantly lower than we estimated. The estimates were provided by different CM firms, and so we're taking a look across our work to see what's going on. But these were surprising us. But as I said, the estimates were by different CM firms. So there's something going on that we're going to try and figure out. For item 14, Technico is proposing 7 Section 3 workers, and the amount of the contract is almost $19 million. There are no questions. I will go to item 15, which relates to Red Hook East and West. This is for the replacement of the roofing. This is certainly not all of the work that will go on there, but as you've heard, we have tried to create different bid packages so we could get work going at every site. So we're moving ahead here at Red Hook East and West. Again, Technico with a variance much lower than our bid estimate. They are proposing 12 Section 3 hires at this site. Item 16 is an increase to the construction management services with ACOM USA related to the sites that work at Cary Gardens, Coney Island, Gravesend, and Haber Houses. As you've heard in the past, once we finished our negotiations with FEMA, we finalized scope increased, duration increased, and so now we are bringing our contracts current with the final scope. In this case, we are recommending an increase in the contract amount of about $10.5 million. AECOM is overseeing over $350 million worth at work for over a 3-year period at these 3 sites. Moving on, item 17 is the recommendation to award to Rosenwalk Tank Company for work at various developments in Manhattan on our wooden roof water tanks. We're recommending a contract in the amount of almost $16 million. You will note that this bid is higher than we estimated, and you've seen this before. There were only 2 companies that repair wooden roof tanks, and so we have let a small consulting contract out of our Office of Design to make recommendations about what alternative systems might be going forward. We expect to have that report in about 4 months.
So is this contract to replace the wooden ones with more wooden ones?
More wooden ones as needed.
Okay.
So we will try and, speed up.
Front load the study so that if it tells us we shouldn't do that?
Well, we'll have the report back in 4 months, and I don't know that we can make it any quicker than that.
It just seems that we should.
But we will be judicious in terms of.
Because if we spend $15 million to replace it, and then the report says you shouldn't replace it, it would seem not prudent. Right.
This is a requirement contract. It's to have on hand.
Okay.
So
we can wait.
Yes.
We can wait.
Yes.
Why does it take 4 months for a study? Just curious.
I do not know. I'll find out.
Question about materials. So consider the best material for these?
I don't know, but I think that's what the study will help us. There's certainly new systems out there.
Yeah. Okay. And then just a more general question. I've noticed a number of these that we have the vendor name check is pending. Do we expect any holdups with that? Question part A, and then part B. How have things been working with MOX in general as far as vendor name checks?
I actually was going to mention here that the vendor name check has come in, and there are no reasons not to award in this case. Vendor name checks can take a while.
It's very, very good.
They are proposing Section 3 Section 3 hires with this contract. Item 18 is an increase to the Roma Scaffolding Inc. contract for brickwork and emergency sidewalk shed at various developments. You will note this is an amendment that increases the value of the contract by almost double. It's a $19.5 million contract increase. We are in a situation with local law 11, our local law 11 and shed work, where we have taken a strong look at how we've been managing that program. We have a lot of contracts that are expired and we cannot amend them. We want to have a contract in place to make sure we can do emergency work and shedding work as needed on time. I will be back in November with recommended awards for new contracts. In the meantime, we want to make sure we have capacity, and the Roma contract was the contract that had both duration and value, the ability to amend the value of it.
And so, Deborah, I know that the funding source, it says it's a mix of federal, mixed finance. Just help me understand. I thought most of the local law stuff was city money. Is that no?
It is mostly city. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But there are places where we're combining.
Because we're doing something else on the
Yes.
site? Okay.
Yes. So this is both an extension to the duration of the contract and the value of the contract.
And do we have pricing in case these periods get extended? Do we have sort of a locked-in rate?
We do have a locked-in rate. Usually in these contracts, they provide us what their escalation will be on an annual basis. We are taking this contract out fairly much the last time we can amend it. That's why we will be back in November with new contract amounts, new contract awards.
Okay. These scaffolding companies really, like once they have it up, you're in a very
Yes.
vulnerable position. So to the extent we can negotiate now.
Yes. The other thing, again, as the chair mentioned earlier, is having the money to do the repairs so the scaffolding we can move on more rapidly. But we really are streamlining. We're working hard right now to address some issues in the local law 11 program, and we should see a more streamlined and better planning with projecting need for contracts to keep the stuff moving. As to items 19 and 20, we are withdrawing those items for the agenda. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, 20 items were presented for board approval, and items number 5 being laid over, and item numbers 19 and 20 being withdrawn. Do I have a motion to approve the items?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to adjourn?
Move.
All in favor? Second, I'm sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.